Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessica Flynn and I am the owner and maker of Flynn Sisters Boutique. And today we're going to be doing a very unique design. Now, my girlfriend Jen from Jen's Crafted Gems sent me this TikTok video of this nail design and she's like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. How would we put this on a tumbler? And I said, well, let's do it together and we can kind of share our ideas on how we want to execute this design onto a cup. It's been so much fun, and I don't know that this video is so much of a tutorial as more of a like inspiration or craft with me type thing, but I just think it's so much fun to tackle new and unique designs with your tumbler maker friends that you've never done before. We've really enjoyed it this week, and I hope you guys like the outcome. Be sure to go follow her too if you want to see her finished cup, because I think she's done a really awesome job. So that's enough chit chat for me. Let's go ahead and get started. You guys, so as usual, I'm starting with a fully prepped and sanded cup. I had previously stripped this one, so it's still a little googly, but whatever. It's fine for what we're doing today. And we are going to spray paint our base colors in a vertical ombre. Starting with the white, I'm using Color Shot today. After I get one side completely white, and that line through the center is mostly straight, I'm going to move on to the black. I'm using Color Shot's matte black, and we're going to apply it in the same way that we did the white, trying not to get too much of that black overspray in the white. The trick to spraying a good base paint like this is to spray from far away. So we want to make sure we're spraying at least like 12 inches from the cup and making long sweeping motions. As soon as this is dry to the touch, we're ready to move on to the next step. For my glitter application today, I want to get my cup warm first. It's been really cold in my shop, which can make spreading thin layers of epoxy pretty difficult. So I'm just going to heat this up with my heat gun real quick. Then I'm going to spread the epoxy on a little thicker than I normally would. The epoxy will act as the adhesive for our glitter today. I've mixed 10 milliliters of some fast setting epoxy, and I'll probably use a little less than 5. We want to go a little thicker than we normally would because I'm using a chunkier cut glitter. I'm starting with Icy Opal from Mica Creations, and then I'm going to add in this iridescent shard glitter that I got in some random kit on Amazon. I'm going to link the kit that I got below in the description box, but if you, whatever kind of shard cut that you've got on hand, or I don't know. I like the look of the shard, but I didn't want to do all shards because it's really hard to apply and get smooth. So that's why I did kind of a mix. I would say this was like a 2-to-1 mix, 2 parts Icy Opal, 1 part shard. And I'm just going to apply it thinly to my whole cup. You don't want to lay it on too thick. Okay, we just want a single layer of glitter here. And I'm going to wipe or press most of it off from that bottom curve at our rim there. And I'm going to wipe off the top rim. This is going to make finishing a lot easier for us. Then I'll take some parchment paper and press down any kind of pokey bits. I'm not going to be able to press it all down, and I really don't want to. I just want everything to lay mostly flat. I let that dry on my rack for a couple hours. Remember, I am using a fast setting epoxy, so your dry time may vary based on the type and brand of epoxy that you're using. Just like we talked about in my video from last weekend, we are going to seal our chunky glitter with this quick coat from counterculturediy.com. Again, that's counterculturediy.com. This is a water-based urethane sealer, and this is just going to get into all those little nooks and crannies of our chunky glitter, and it's going to make that first layer of epoxy go on much smoother. Applying it with a gloved hand while it's on my turner. After I get the whole cup coated, I'm going to let this dry for a good 45 minutes to an hour before we move on to our next step. You want to coat this with about 30 to 60 milliliters of epoxy. I think I tried to stretch out this 30 milliliters here and it just wasn't enough. So I would say a good maybe mix up 60 milliliters. You probably won't use it all. This is a 30-ounce skinny straight so it's taken quite a bit to get it covered. But after I apply my epoxy, I'm just going to hit it with my torch to pop any bubbles, and I'm going to let this dry for about 6 to 8 hours before we move on to the next step. Now that that layer is dry, I am going to apply what I'm calling a milky layer. All right, I've got 30 milliliters of epoxy mixed here, and I am pouring a little bit of it into a separate medicine cup, and I'm going to be adding some azalea mica powder from Simply Sarah's Custom Creations. I will have a link and a discount code for this down below. It's just this really beautiful, kind of sparkly, color shifty opal that I thought would add some really pretty interest to our design. And with the remainder of our epoxy, I'm going to use Alumilite's white epoxy dye. You're gonna see that I barely even wipe off a tiny, tiny amount on my mixing stick there, and I'm going to mix that into my epoxy. A little bit of this goes a long way, pretty much like the tip of a toothpick is the amount that you want to add to this, because we want to have that milky finish without it being too white. You'll see a little white patch that I've already applied to the cup there. That was a little test patch I did because the first batch of epoxy I mixed was way too white. After I've coated the cup with that milky epoxy, I'm now going to go in with the azalea that we mixed, and I'm just kind of putting this on willy-nilly. You want to smooth your epoxy out as much as possible, but I also don't want to just apply this liberally all the way all around the cup. I kind of want there to be a little bit of kind of interest and texture in there. I don't know if I achieved that. I just knew that I wanted this like shifty opal pretty finish to this glitter here, but whatever. So after we get that on there, I'm just going to torch it like I normally would to pop any bubbles. It's also going to help smooth things out because we were a little bit reckless in our application here. I let this coat dry for about 6 to 8 hours, and then I went directly over that with a third coat of just clear epoxy because we were still very much rocky road at this point. I let that third coat dry for about 10 to 12 hours because we had to do quite a bit of sanding after that third coat. I did the sanding off camera, and we are going to be splitting our cup. I want to split it down the center of the cup so that the black and white shows from the front and the back. Okay, so I'm using the seams of my cup lid. If you look really close at your cup lid, there'll be a seam on either end, and that shows the true center of your cup. So I'm going to line that seam up with my line tool and I'm going to mark it with a mechanical pencil. So what we should be left with is a line down either end of the cup, splitting it in half so you can see an even amount of the black and white mixed from both sides of the cup. I'm going to line out my pencil line with some thin masking tape. I will be marking that later, so yes, it is necessary that I have that. On the inside of that line that I just created, I will place some blue 1-inch painter's tape on either side. This is really hard to articulate. I hope you stay with me here, okay? And then to the inside of that blue masking tape, I'm going to place a 1/2-inch piece of masking tape, because what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to line out my own snakeskin pattern, and this is just going to help me with sort of a guide to line everything up. So after we get the masking tape applied to both sides of that half that we're working on, we should have something that looks like this. Next, I'm going to get my ruler out and a Sharpie, and I'm going to mark every 1.5 inches, starting 1 inch down from my cup. My cup is 9.5 inches tall, so by starting 1 inch down, I will end with 1 inch from the bottom. So it kind of centers these 1.5 inch sections. You don't really have to do it that way. You could space your scales out however you want, but this is what made the most sense to me. I marked the identical lines on the other side. So starting 1 inch down from the top rim, we're going to mark off every 1.5 inch line. I'm sure that you guys are watching this thinking I'm crazy or you don't understand what I'm going to be doing, but it's all going to make sense here in just a little bit. So stay with me. I'm also going to mark those same exact lines on the very outer piece of thin masking tape. See the example photo here? Basically what I'm doing by placing this masking tape and measuring and drawing all these little dots is I'm going to later use these for like a big game of connect the dots, only instead of drawing the lines from dot to dot, we're going to be lining them out with gold vinyl. Once I've got all these dots placed, again, these dots on this outer little piece of tape here are the same width as the dots that I put on the inside. So starting an inch from the top rim, we're gonna mark every 1.5 inches down. So we should be left with something like this. All right, and I've got my gold textured vinyl. I've already cut this on my Cricut. I used the shapes feature in Cricut Design Space, and I sized these squares by 11.5 inches wide by 0.08 inches tall. So again, 11.5 inches wide by 0.08 inches tall. And what we're doing right now is playing connect the dots with the dots that we measured and placed earlier. So we're just going to go right down the center, side to side, trimming with our craft knife along the masking tape, and we're going to go all the way down the front center of our cup. Once we have the first set of lines placed, we're going to remove the 1-inch painter's tape and the 1/2 inch painter's tape from either end of those little gold lines that we just placed. And now we're going to work on the crisscross portion of our lines. So it's really difficult for me to try and articulate this, but basically what we'll do is we're going to line up these crisscross lines with the dots that we placed earlier on the last piece of masking tape left. Like, I don't really know how to articulate this, guys, but you just kind of got to watch. So see, one end of this diagonal line I'm placing now goes from one end of that vertical line and matches up with the dot above the line that we just connected with. All right. And we're going to do that all the way down the side on either end, making like a crisscross pattern. The reason I took the time to line out those little dots is so all of this is like evenly spaced and makes sense and lines up well. So we're going to repeat that process all the way down the side of our cup. What we should be left with is something that kind of looks like this snakeskin pattern. We're repeating those crisscross lines on the other end of our cup, doing exactly like we did it on the first side of our cup. Once I get done with all that, I'm going to take another one of these vinyl lines and place it right down that center line that we marked off with our pencil earlier, just to clean up and nicely frame out that snakeskin pattern that we just made. The reason I like using this textured metallic vinyl for a project like this is it's not going to show all the overlaps and things, which there will be a lot of overlaps. Whereas if we were using like a chrome finish vinyl or something, you would definitely see. I am wrapping that center line of vinyl all the way around the bottom of my cup, and I will do the same on the opposite end, having both pieces meet at the bottom and trimming the excess with my craft knife. I'm going to apply this snake decal that I found to the front of our cup. I've sized this at around 8 inches long by maybe close to 4 inches wide. Obviously, your sizing will be different based on the, type of cup you're using. I'm going to peel back my backing paper first, though, before I apply this to make sure it lifts easily once it's on the cup. And of course, we're going to measure twice, so we just have to cut once. After I get the snake applied to my tumbler, I'm going to weed all the little fine details that are inside the snake design, just because it'll be easier for me. There's a lot of little fine detail and things, and I didn't want to have to try and weed this before I transferred it, because it was really tedious. Similar to what we did last week, with that celestial sun and moon kind of design that I did. We should have something that looks like this once we're all done with that vinyl work, and then I'm just going to apply my final coats of epoxy. This cup took 2 final coats before it was totally smooth, and with this particular kind of design, we want to make sure we get that final coat totally smooth and good, because we are going to matte finish half of our cup. Here's my cup completely finished. It's smooth, it's beautiful. The final coats are completely done. They've been drying for at least 12 hours, and I'm going to tape off half of my cup. I want half the cup matte and half the cup shiny, just to give some contrast between that snake skin and the snake side. So again, we're just running a thick piece of painter's tape right along half my cup, and we're gonna get cracking on the matte finish. This is Final Sand from DIYepoxy.com. Their bottles today look different. This is a really old bottle. I originally did a tutorial on this a couple years ago. I will link it down below in the description box if you want more information on this. But every single time I do a matte finish video, or I see a post about it in a Facebook group, or whatever the case may be, every single time people ask me, well, do you have to seal it? Do you do epoxy over it? What do we do after? Nothing. You don't do anything after, because you have to understand we are scuffing up and matte finishing the outer layer of our epoxy. We're taking away the shine from this final layer of epoxy. We're not putting anything else over this, because that's what's creating the matte effect. This Final Sand product is not toxic. You don't need to wear gloves with it. It's not a chemical that's going to react with the epoxy and make it matte. It's going to sand it down, and it's abrasive enough to take off the shine from the finish, and that's it. It doesn't make our epoxy porous, all right? It doesn't make it like absorb oils and things like that. It's just roughing up the surface. Such a fine amount that we're removing here. It's also not going to make that side of our epoxy toxic or anything like this. This epoxy has been drying well over 12 hours, okay? It is ready to go for this process. I'm using 00 grade steel wool and about a quarter size amount of the product, and I'm just rubbing it in with 10 minutes on the clock. Do not do this for 2 seconds and think you're done. You gotta go a full 10 minutes. Anytime I see people complain about their finish with this process, they say, oh, it just looks scratched. That's because you didn't do it long enough. Go back and go for a few more minutes. Your arms and your shoulders should hurt by the end of this process. After about 10 minutes of that scrubbing, I rinsed it off with some water and dried my cup thoroughly just to see if it was to the level that I wanted it. I was absolutely sure that it was matte enough. Then I removed my tape, and it should look something like this. So you can clearly see the difference of the really matte finish right next to that glossy finish. I love the contrast of that. And that's it. So we don't need to do anything else to this cup. You don't need to epoxy over the matte part, okay? As I explained earlier, we're just roughing up the surface on that side of the cup to create this matte look. And I just absolutely love this design. I think it's so unique. Thank you so much, Jen, for pushing me out of my comfort zone to do something really cool and unique. I just love it. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments. And if you like my video, please be sure to give us a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I upload new videos every Wednesday and Saturday. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. And a big thank you to all of our Flynn Sisters exclusive members. Thank you for your pledge. Your support means the world to our channel. If you love this video, you could check out our last video here. Also be sure to find us on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and of course subscribe for all our new videos that come out every Wednesday and Saturday. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.